Carried. Thank you. Item 8 now. So we've decided how we're going to consult. Let's look at what we are going to consult on. And I welcome Tamsin, our new program manager for this, to present the item. Thank you, Tam.
Ngā mihi ki a koe, Chair, and tēnā koutou ngā kawana o te konihira o Tamaki Makaurau. This item on today's agenda is a procedural report outlining the process and a high-level overview of the contents of the consultation material for the annual budget 2022-23. In particular, we are required to include the Tupuna operational plan in the consultation material, and I note the draft operational plan was approved by the Tupuna Authority on the 15th of November last year and adopted by the governing body on the 8th of December. We have included a statement of proposal for the proposed amendment to the Waste Management and Minimisation Plan 2018, our waste plan, to meet the requirements of the special consultative procedure required when amending this plan. These amendments relate to the waste standardisation as outlined in the consultation material. This proposal was agreed as an item for consultation by the governing body on the 8th of December last year. We have also included proposed changes to local board decision-making responsibilities in the consultation document and supporting information as related to the governance framework review decisions for this proposal to be included in the budget consultation as agreed at the governing body meeting on Thursday, the 28th of October last year. The report also outlines the development of the annual budget and local board agreements. It provides context to the process, so what we're required to do, and it outlines the key milestones and next steps in this budget process. This report has both the consultation document and supporting information attached. These documents were discussed last week at the Finance and Performance Workshop. Finally, the recommendations of the report ask you to agree to recommend to the governing body that it adopt the supporting information and consultation document for the annual budget 22-23 and to recommend that you delegate responsibility to the chair of FMP and the CFO to approve final edits to the documents as required prior to consultation going live on February the 28th. Before I take any partai, I just want to double check that Ross, you don't have anything you'd like to cover off.
Just very briefly, as we've covered in workshops and has been addressed previously, we are still going through a revaluation process for this year. So you may note that the page in the CD that talks about rates increases has some placeholder information there, but we will need to go through an exercise as we work through the final numbers for the revaluation. There will need to be some tweaks, updates to the final details of rates information in both the CD and support information. None of that changes the underlying policy intention. The board impacts are the same, but it is important that we have absolutely the right numbers, the very latest information in the CD. So if there's any questions on that, Andrew Duncan can add further to that. But yeah, so the way we propose to deal with that is we're asking you to adopt the CD today, but under resolutions, recommendations C there is a delegation, and so any final adjustments that are necessary in terms of the rate information as a consequence of the latest revaluation data, we will work through that with the delegates under that resolution. Andrew, is there anything you wanted to add at this point?
That's fine, Ross. I'm happy to answer any questions. We'll make some appropriate changes to reflect the updated information. And as soon as we've completed that analysis, we'll make it available to the
I better keep it as a question. So how does this budget improve the position in terms of council's overall depreciation position and long-term objectives? And what percentages does it take us to?
So in the recovery budget, we looked at a range of what are the right parameters for depreciation, and so there we had a policy of moving to 100% fully funded depreciation by 2025. I believe others will correct me if that's wrong, but and so what we've done is we've kind of set the path, and then there is, as we move towards that, certain percentages each year. Those are set out in our revenue and financing policy. We've taken that as a key bottom line that we think as staff, we think it's appropriate that we don't we maintain that minimum level of depreciation funding. If we depart from that and don't adequately provide for depreciation, that does put financial sustainability at risk. It means we're basically borrowing for asset renewals, which is not sustainable over time. So we've set certain debt parameters and depreciation funding parameters in the recovery budget, and this proposed budget, the trajectory at the moment, based off of the forecasts we have, is that we will stay within those parameters in the recovery budget. We have highlighted that there is risk around that, and as we work for the second half of the budget to finalise it, we might need further adjustments to make sure we maintain that position. But at the moment, based off the latest information, that we are predicting to be within those depreciation and debt parameters.
Thank you, Ross. And Madam Chair, the second question, in terms of where does this, there are figures in the report, Ross, but just to summarise, the position in terms of council group's overall debt, and what does that move from, I guess, in percentage terms from this current year to the proposed budget in terms of an increase in debt, and what are the absolute projected figures that our debt is projected to sit at the end of the next financial year end?
Okay, I don't have all the figures off the top of my head, whether Michael Burns or others maybe be able to quickly look those up. So there is in the recovery budget, there was a debt profile. So debt does increase over time. So over the next 10 years through to 2031, we are using an increase in debt to help invest in the city. What we are seeing is I forget the numbers off the top of my head. Michael, others might be looking them up. We are seeing a step up in debt of several billion, but it's in the billions. But what we're seeing in terms of asset values, the assets for the city is in the tens of billions. So we're taking on more debt that was planned. We're kind of within the ranges of what we talked about in the recovery budget, but it is investing in the city, and it is less than it's much less than the growth in assets. So, Mike, did you want to just talk about some of the numbers if you can?
Yes, just quickly, the figures we have included in the supporting information in section 2.4, and at the start of that section, there is a brief table that outlines the key financial projections and compares those with what was in the 10-year budget. So total borrowing at the end of the 22-23 year is projected to be just over 12.6 billion. And to sit at 271% of revenue. So just above that 270 figure that we look to our long-term target, but well within the limits that we've set of 290%.
Oh, terrific. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Councillor. Look, before we move, I might just move this myself, because noting that all the recommendations are actually recommending to the GB. Deputy Chair, are you happy to second?
Would love to. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I had a second partai from Councillor Cooper. Councillor Cooper. Linda, we can't.
Yes, I'm there. It's just I was tapping the button and it wouldn't work. Sorry about that. So I just following on from Councillor Sayers' questions, I know we talked about debt. Can we just be reminded, what do we get for that? Like, so that's quite a significant amount of new infrastructure, is that right? Because I just want us to talk about the balancing of the books, which this gives us.
Yes, so that is correct. We're borrowing primarily to fund infrastructure investment, and the value of the group's assets does increase by much more than the debt. So Mike outlined the increase in the debt number. Maybe you can find on that same page, I think on that table, it has the asset number as well. I'm just trying to find the right page. Mike, are you able to talk about, well, what is given the movement in debt, what's the movement in assets?
Yeah, so thank you. That the projected total assets at the end of next year is just over $65.5 billion. That's an increase. There's a capital expenditure projection of over $3 billion for the next financial year. So at the same time as our borrowing is increasing by just under $1 billion, we're expecting to invest over $3 billion in capital works.
Right, so we get good value for money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other partai? No, we'll move to comments now. Any comments?
Oh, sorry, I didn't get time to type it in, Councillor Simpson, Chair.
Sorry, and welcome. You had a partai.
Yeah, sorry, it's Richard here. No, it was just a question, and I have asked it before. If we were not to fund that this year's capital by debt, how much would the rates increase be this year if we were wanting to do that amount of capital? Do you have an approximate number on that?
An extra $1 billion of cash, it would be an extremely large rates increase number. Yeah, you hate to do the maths, but you're talking a massive amount. A huge number.
Yeah. So I guess my question is
of the order of 50% or something.
Yes. So I guess my question was to do that amount of new infrastructure, we'd either have to put up the rates 50%, borrow that money as we are, or not do the infrastructure at all.
Yes, broadly those are the choices. It's those. We wouldn't recommend using rates in that way, but those are broadly the choices. Well, if you want to invest in the infrastructure, they need to be paid for some way, and equally, if we don't invest, there are consequences to that as well.
Right. No, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Cashmore, did you have a question?
Yes, please, to Ross and to Michael. Again, it's around the CapEx and the OpEx equation. The extra borrowings we take, the CapEx that we're delivering is a lot more than that, which I understand comes from the surplus we make from the OpEx budgets and from subsidies we get from NZTA and so forth. Am I correct in that assumption?
That's correct. So the CapEx is funded from operating surpluses we make. So the depreciation that, as we talked about, when we say we're working towards fully funding depreciation, it means we make an operating surplus, and that pays for the renewals part of the capital program. And other funding sources include, as you say, government subsidies, development contributions, fuel taxes, and a range of other things like that.
So Ross, off the top of your head, do you have the number of our total capital spend? How much of it is borrowing as a percentage? How much is it cash from surpluses, and how much is it from subsidies from government?
So it's about $3 billion of capital investment. It is about $1 billion of borrowings. I might need Mike's help with this table there in the document. It's the surplus. Surplus is maybe $1 billion. Mike, have you got some numbers there?
960 million.
Yeah, so the operating surplus is projected to be just over 1.1 billion. There's a 570 million of capital subsidies from the Crown, and over 265 million of development contributions. As I've said before, just under $1 billion of debt, and is about 100 million of proceeds from asset sales that we've planned for.
Thanks,
So
Ross. Thanks, Michael. That's very comprehensive. I think that paints a very clear picture that we all need to understand thoroughly. My last point is we are having to have this very large capital expenditure, partly to fund legacy projects that weren't done, and secondly to create new projects to provide better services, and thirdly is to accommodate for our population growth, which has been at record levels up until last year. Looking forward, Michael, if our population remains static or even declines, will that change projections in the LTP for the next round?
Yes, it would. We would have to update our projections. I mean, I think the key, it would impact both our expenditure and our revenue projections. In the expenditure space, obviously, the amount of infrastructure for growth that would be needed would need to be adjusted, but we're still in the space of playing catch up in the housing space now. But the real more immediate hit would be on the revenue side, where we wouldn't be having new rating units coming on stream, and we would not be receiving those development contributions.
All good points to bear in mind. Thank you, Michael. It's very good.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, staff. Councillor Walker, did you have a question?
Sure. Can you hear me, Madam Chair?
Yes, I can, Councillor. Thank you.
It's a question that I've asked before. It goes to the climate change targeted rate, which of course is designed to get emissions down faster. And what I've asked for is some approximation around the reduction in emissions that are coming from the targeted rate. Some of it's easier, for example, electrification of the ferries. I would expect it wouldn't be too hard to put some sort of number on the 14,800 trees, and at least some indication of what we're getting around public transport and buses. Otherwise, it is almost impossible for anybody out there in the community to make any rational judgment on whether we're getting good bang for our buck and whether there aren't other things that might be better, faster, more economical.
Councillor, did you get the memo on this on Friday that was sent to you?
I may not have read that.
The answer, I think you'll find, Councillor, was in that memo. It was sent out on Friday.
In the memo, was it? Okay, I haven't seen that memo, so I will look for it.
Thank you. Tamsin, it was sent on Friday, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Madam Chair. So it's uploaded to Nexus, Councillor Walker, and I can send you a link after this item.
Oh, okay, so the email refers to the Nexus link, does it?
Yeah.
Okay, all good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other part-I or questions? No, I'll move now to comments. Anyone got any comments? Well, in concluding this item, sorry, Councillor Sayers, you've got a comment?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. That is a funny button. You click it and it goes off again. I guess I would like to make a comment. I fully support Auckland Council spending ratepayers' money on infrastructure and services Aucklanders need. However, I'm still of the opinion that council spending levels need to be kept within a current financial envelope, and not by continuously digging deep into ratepayers' pockets via rate increases and new rates, such as new targeted rates. So let's see what Aucklanders say. But it might have been nice, as I've constantly said, that there might have been an alternative along the lines that I've just suggested, and not developed by a single councillor, but perhaps at the request of the Chief Executive Officer and the staff that he has to come up with one. So maybe in the future it could be an option that we put out to Aucklanders to give their opinion on. The budget does drive Auckland further into debt, and I believe the budget supports funding projects and agendas that are actually the domain of central government rather than local government. That includes things around climate change, business development, and the promotion of various social agendas. And I will make a quick comment about the climate change targeted rate. I guess I guess, Madam Chair, if this new targeted rate is supported by the public, certainly in my ward, I'd like to signal that we could be finding a direction of that money wanting to go into things such as the building of seawalls in the eastern beaches of Maharangi, or the fixing of the Hill Street intersection, and which spews out hours of emissions into the atmosphere from stationary vehicles idling there. The sealing of the unsealed roads, again, Madam Chair, which are tipping tons of gravel and pollutants into the waterways and the harbours, or even flood prevention measures in dealing with traffic congestion in Kemu. So I'll just signal those two officers and my colleagues about perhaps the targeting of how that money may be used should the rate actually come in. So look, we'll be going out for public input, but I think for the reasons that I've indicated above, I'm just considering it whether I will abstain or vote against this, Madam Chair, as I feel it's the direction the budget takes us is a continuous direction into further debt and a position that I'm not comfortable with the trajectory of the Auckland Council is heading in. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Well, in concluding this debate...
Sorry, Chair.
Oh, sorry, Councillor.
Oh, sorry to interrupt you. Wrap up, Chair. I've got a comment on the sidebar. Sorry, Chair. Yeah, look, just very quickly. And I will be quick because we have 2 ears and 1 mouth in these kind of situations. It's time for us to listen to Aucklanders about what their views are. And that's exactly the kind of motions we're passing today, is to say, hey, look, what do you guys think? And then we will debate what they tell us, and we'll go from there. But just very quickly as well, that every debate on this since the dawn of time is really actually about what level of service people want. And the rates reflect that level of service. So if we're calling on spending cuts, that's fair enough. But the question is what services will be cut to pay for them. And I'd really love feedback on this from people that do think that we need to cut rates or we need to reduce our spending. That's totally a fair enough position, but I'd just like to know how that will really help us do our job as councillors. And ultimately, I think it's time for Aucklanders to have their say on this. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. Councillor Stewart, have you got a comment?
Yes, I'd just like to say that I agree with what Councillor Sayers actually said about the climate change, and the money should be spent on what the public actually think it should be spent on. And flooding and stormwater, as you know, is my thing. And I think there are places that we can cut some money, and I welcome the community coming back and telling us where they think they can. And I think maybe some of the cycleways and some of the painted roads and things like that, they're probably some of the cuts we could cut straight away.
Thank you, Councillor. Look, just for ease of me, I seem to have too many things open. If you have a comment or a question, can you please use the chat bar? The hands, there are so many of you. I can't necessarily identify who's got a hand up. So are there any more comments before I round off the debate? Right, I see no. So,
sorry, Madam Chair, Councillor Watson here. I just put in to make a brief comment, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just want to confine my comments to the consultation document, which is what we're going out with, and I know. At this stage, and we've heard it already, we often make the comment, well, we want to hear what Aucklanders have got to say, and, presumably go through the due process of listening to those sentiments and making a decision on them. When I go to the last part, the feedback form, which is usually, of course, the focal point of anyone that goes to the bother of engaging directly in the consultation process, particularly as it goes to committing pen to paper in relation to the questions that we ask. People are inevitably guided by the text that informs the question. So, for instance, in the climate action targeted rate, which is the first one, we have our transport emissions reduction spelt out, the 64%, and we have this on the face of it, this large budget that is going to be directed towards that. I guess, Madam Chair, what I like to hear, and I'm not sure if I will hear it or not, is in this question, and indeed on the other one to do with prioritising spending, and certainly the prioritised spending option is, if you go to the accompanying information, it is very generalised, and it is very hard for anyone to make an informed comment other than the usual, cliches of, maybe cost reduction or, or picking a few projects to zero in. And so I know there's a lot of consultation on at the moment. There's been a lot of consultation leading up to now. There's consultation going on as it stands with various other council things. I just hope that in this next round that we do identify or give people the opportunity to zero in on some specifics. So as far as the climate action targeted rate goes, as it's framed, it's very hard for people to necessarily say no to that. But certainly what I would like to see coming through from people is the notion of how we can start that more effectively now, and how we can make use of our existing resources that are there that are underutilised to an extent, and that could be contributing to that reduction here and now, rather than waiting for the kind of magical nirvana in the future where there's cycleways for Africa and everyone's walking and running, and there's people jumping on buses. I guess it's the interim period in between before these services are available, and we don't know if people will even take them up at that point. So I'm certain there's people with a lot of expertise on climate action and emphasis on the word action, and I hope they go beyond just the question we've asked to actually focus in on what the council could be leading out on here and now to get those emissions down. And similarly, Madam Chair, with the question that goes to prioritising operating spending, again, it's hard for councillors to get an insight to all the cost centres in council, far less the public. But again, I know there's people out in the public that do have an insight, that do manage budgets, and that do have some informed comment to make on how the council can perhaps look at things differently, rather than reverting to the almost entrenched kind of position now of borrowing, selling it, and increasingly, increased rates. So it's not appropriate to go into too much more detail, but other than to say, I do hope people that have got that degree of insight, because you do hear a lot of it when you're out in the community, do engage in this process despite the veritable tsunami of consultation material that's out, and that we do get some strong feedback that perhaps points innovative or new ways to go, because I don't think the current way is sustainable, not in the long term anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next comment I have is from His Worship the Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, just a couple of brief comments. What we're voting on today is a document to go out to consultation. If you vote against the document going out to consultation, then I presume that means you don't want to consult on it. This is the product of many workshops that we've been through. It puts out certain propositions, and what we now want to do in the normal course of events in a democracy is to hear what the public has to say about it, both through direct submissions and through an independent poll to get a cross-section of what Aucklanders think. So if we don't go out to consultation, one, we'd be in breach of the law, but two, we wouldn't have the benefit of hearing what our citizens are saying about it. Secondly, to say that that debt is out of control. Clearly it isn't. As Ross and Michael have said, we are well within the parameters of the 290% debt to revenue ratio that we set in the recovery budget. I think the figure that Michael gave us was 271%. So actually we're not only just within our recovery budget parameters by about 20%, but we're within our original goal of 270%, notwithstanding the huge impact that COVID had on us and the loss of up to $1 billion in revenue. To say, look, we are a growing city, or we were until COVID, and we will be again. And every one of us recognises the fact that the problems that we have as a city are because we've underinvested in infrastructure for so long. And this council has done the reverse. We've invested at record levels because we know that's the only way to make this a world-class and a livable city. So if you're not, borrowing, nothing wrong with borrowing. We all borrow to buy our houses. We don't pay for it in cash. We don't pay for it out of current income. We borrow because we'll be in that house for a long time, just like we borrow on council because it's intergenerational. The fact that Standard & Poor's gives us the one of the highest credit rating levels of any organisation outside of government is an indication that they think our borrowing is prudential. And again, as our officers have pointed out, the debt might be going up, but the value of our assets, $65 billion. That's a huge increase. 5 years ago, it was around, I think, about 47 billion. So we are adding assets that we need. To suggest that somehow we're spending money on things that the government should be doing, well, the Climate Action Targeted Rate covers bus services, it covers ferry emissions, and it covers the planting of shade trees in the deprived areas of our city that have a fraction of the urban canopy that other areas of the city has. Each one of those expenditure items are our responsibility. Nobody's going to do it for us. We have to do it for it. We've got to do it for ourselves. And the advantages of that, I mean, one, our people on the climate action team have told us repeatedly, if you want to go for a 64% reduction in transport emissions, which everybody I think voted for, then you have to have a way of achieving mode change. And you can't get mode change if you don't have anything that people can change to. Every one of us voted for the climate emergency. I presume we all did that sincerely, knowing that if we want to get, if we recognise that there's a crisis, it's not good enough just to recognise it, but you've got to do something about it. And, the third thing is that the climate action plan was, again, I think, supported overwhelmingly, if not universally. What's the point of having a climate action plan if you never intend to implement it? And if you don't fund it, how do you implement it? So, I think while there's room for consultation and discussion and debate that will follow this process, the things that we are setting out to consultation do address decisions that we've made in other areas overwhelmingly as a council, and they provide the funding to make the thing happen. They also provide the opportunity to get co-benefits, not just co-benefits. I mean, there are the co-benefits of dealing with congestion, which you won't deal with unless you've got a decent public transport system, but also the co-funding from government. So we could choose to do nothing, but effectively we'd be giving away, according to the stats our officials have given us, about $450 million in investment in our city by the government that we won't get unless we're prepared ourselves to put our money where our mouth is. So I'd absolutely commend this consultation document to my colleagues on council. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Another comment from Councillor Walker.
Sure, Madam Chair. So I looked at the response and those actions, and effectively I'm told that we're not quantifying anything, which is what I thought. So the ongoing concern that I've got is that we're going out with a massive rate increase targeted around reducing emissions, and there is no quantification of what that reduction in emissions is. Zero. Okay, so it's really fluffy stuff. My ongoing concern is that I believe we could be doing much better, much faster, much more economically than what we're doing now. So that is an ongoing concern I've got, and I cannot see how it is possible for people to make meaningful contributions around a reduction in emissions without knowing what they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Councillor Cooper. Councillor Cooper, your microphone is not on.
More. Yeah, so I suppose for me, you know, I wasn't really hot on the whole climate action targeted rate, but I did absolutely agree to put this out to consultation. But I'm fairly comfortable that the proposals, though it's not quantified down to the whatever cubic metre of carbon that Councillor Walker wants, it's a no-brainer that if you get people into electric buses and out of cars, you will have emissions reduction. And also, if you plant trees, which you will have sequestering of carbon. So for me, I still want to hear what people say, and I hope people understand this, but it's pretty simple and straightforward to me that you will get emissions reduction, because this is about public transport, really. What we're going to buy with this targeted rate, alongside a whole lot of other money from government, is public transport. And we all know that reduces emissions. So I feel fairly comfortable that what we're going out with, any reasonable person understands that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Sandra, is that the last of the comments?
Yes, Madam Chair, I can't see any others on the chat.
Well, councillors and the Mayor, in finalising the comments for this item, I want to thank our staff very much for the consultation material that they've put together. I mean, there's a couple of things that have to happen, in my opinion, and that is we live and breathe this, well, most of us live and breathe this almost every day. But for the people out there, there are some often incorrect assumptions that are made. And what we're trying to do is create documentation that gives the level of detail for those who actually want to go into that detail, but also highlights the top level stuff for those who potentially just want to get a bit of an overview. Staff, I love the storm clouds. I love the storm clouds that you have put in pictorial form around the fact that we have global pressures, national pressures and local pressures. I love the steam machine, the levers that can be pulled to actually, which one are we going to turn on to let out some of the pressure. I love the visual of that. I think it's been put together very, very well, and every year it seems to be better than the year before, so I want to thank you all. To my colleagues, I want to thank you for the way that you handled the workshops to this point. I think that every councillor who has created concerns or brought up questions in a workshop around issues that they think should be changed or whatever, those issues have always been covered by staff. When I look at this, I don't think any councillor has had potentially an item that hasn't been explored, looked at and come back with some options around that. So what we have, although it's the Mayor's budget really that we go out to Auckland with, I think everyone's had a chance to question the elements around that and actually have their say and have those points and issues dealt with. I hope that we all in supporting this today recognise that we do so, however, with an open mind. And there should be no preconceived decisions here. This is an open mind. Every one question that we're asking Auckland has a support and do not support option. And I think it is very important that we have that open mind and make sure we are prepared to listen to whatever Auckland comes back with. So to that, my big thanks once again to all staff, and I'll take it to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Against?
Aye.
Aye. Against, Sayers.
Against, one item against Councillor Sayers, and I take that as carried with one against. We move now to item 9, which is the rating of